Hi, this is Perry Marshall, author of Memos from the Head Office. And the best advice I ever got was instead of going on your phone, your email, social media, news, start your day in a notebook for a few minutes and get yourself centered before your day begins. It goes so much better after that.
Ooh, started in a notebook. So do you have a brand of notebook, Perry, that you love the most? Do you have like a Moleskine or a
Well,
Lichtenstern?
I get the black and red notebooks. I'm not real particular about which one you use. What's important is that you use one. And it's actually the best habit I've ever cultivated. I've been doing it every day for 8 years. I haven't missed a day, and it's the best thing I ever did.
Awesome. Awesome, man. So, well, let me congratulate you on your latest book, man. This is pretty cool. Last we talked about the 80-20 rule, which was really fun.
Yes. Yes.
And amazingly, this is like a prequel to that, though not really related, right? Like that, isn't that how you got the idea? Talk to us about how this came to you.
Well, so I wrote the book 80-20 Sales and Marketing, which is over my shoulder. It's sold 70,000 copies, and it's kind of a marketing classic. But there's a story behind that book that most people have not heard. And so the story is this is about 18 years ago. I read Richard Koch's 80-20 book, and I suddenly realized, oh, whoa, wait a minute. 80-20 is like there's an 80-20 inside every 80-20. And that's like a whole different thing than I've ever thought of or imagined. And this also moves 80-20 from like one of these kind of mildly interesting little details to actually probably the most important thing you could ever know about business. And so I had this epiphany, and the epiphany was, this is a math formula. What is it? And I'm an engineer. And so I started obsessing about this. Well, so there was this particular day, and I was obsessing about two things. It was a Friday in March of 2003. And the first thing I was obsessing about was, well, what's this math formula? I'm looking around. I'm on the internet. Like, I can't find anything like what I'm looking for. And the other thing was earlier that week, I had done a choreographed teleseminar designed to sell. And I had sold $11,000 of stuff in 1 hour, which to me at the time was just like a mind blow. Like, dang. Like, you ever had one of those, Phil? And I thought, I wonder if I could use my business to help this little project in Mozambique. My brother-in-law was running this thing, and they had a feeding program and a school and an AIDS hospice and a church and all this stuff. And so I was thinking about Mozambique and math all day long. But I hadn't talked to anybody about this, not even my wife. And I went to this, there was this Friday night music thing at church, and they're just playing this kind of Pink Floyd kind of music. And I'm standing there, and I'm in La La Land, and my mind's a million miles away, and I'm thinking about math, and I'm thinking about Mozambique. And I look up, and this woman is walking straight for me. I've never seen her in my life. I have no idea who she is. She's black, and she goes, "Hi, my name is Vivian. The Lord gave me a word for you." Now, I had heard of things like this. I'd never had it happen to me. And I thought, well, this ought to be interesting. And she goes, "The Lord told me that you're very good at math, and you're working some kind of formula, some kind of equation, some kind of invention, and you're going to figure it out." And I looked at her, and I looked around, and I started doing math in my head. I was like, what are the chances that a random woman that I've never met in my life just walks up to me and tells me I'm working on a math problem? And how many other people in this room are working on a math problem right now? Like probably zero. And she turned to walk away, and then she spun around and she goes, "Oh," and he told me something else. She goes, "You want to support missions, and God is going to bless your business so you can support missions." And I just stared at her with my mouth open. And I was almost on the verge of tears. And I said, if only you knew. And she goes, he knows, and just walks away. And I stood there and I was like, did that just happen? Like, that just happened. Like, a complete stranger walked up to me, read me my email twice in about, I don't know, 45 seconds, and left. And this, like, Phil, this seriously got my attention. And that is like the real story behind the 80/20 book. That was 10 years before I wrote this book.
Wow. Wow, man. That's crazy. And that's really wild. And then I read your book and I'm like, wow, well, I thought Perry was crazy, but there's a whole bunch of people that are crazy, right? I mean, that's the very interesting thing to me, is that there's a lot of, I don't know, coincidence is too strong of a word, maybe not strong enough of a word, but
right.
Instances of getting something because you're tuned in. So talk to me about, I mean, do you think that were you writing doing the morning pages and all of that writing to start, Perry, or when did that start? Because you said
no, that started 8 years ago. That started, in fact, it was the year that the 80/20 book came out. So no, I wasn't doing that. At least not the way that I do it now. And at the time, my radar was not on to look for, prophetic people or anything like that. But see, the thing is so this is a book of stories like this, and there's a whole bunch of them, and they're remarkable, and they're documented. And so let's just start with, the world is a stranger place than your educators and society in general ever really wanted to tell you. Okay. I mean, to some people, this is like completely new. But depending on where you hang out and who you know, to some people, it's like, oh, yeah. Like, what's new about this? Like, isn't this like the oldest thing in the world? Yeah, this is like pretty much the oldest thing in the world. Okay. Like, it's older than Cain and Abel, But most modern Western technological people are completely disconnected from that. And they are addicted to their cell phones, and they're just in the media, and they're doing whatever the next email tells them to do. And they don't hear the muse. They don't listen to the head office. The Greeks had a word for this, and it was the muse. And when the Greeks said somebody, they didn't say somebody was a genius. They said they had genius, or they had access to genius, because they saw it as something that comes from the outside. And one of the first stories I mentioned in the book is J.K. Rowling. Most people don't know the Harry Potter whole thing was like a giant download that came to her when she was on a stalled train. And she had a notebook with her, and like this idea of a story just starts pouring into her head, and she's writing as fast as she can, and she kind of gets the general idea, and then she spent, including the characters and everything. And then this is the part of the story that is, I think, the real. Then she spent like 5 or 10 years untangling it all and getting it. It's not like it came like word for word, okay, but the idea came intact, and then she had to it's almost like taking aluminum tinfoil and like spreading the wrinkles out with your finger, I don't know, you ever do that with a candy bar?
Sure.
Or something, okay, she had to do that to get the story ready for showtime. And this has been my experience. Okay, so I didn't even mention, when I read the Richard Koch book and I had this epiphany, the epiphany was one of these, it wasn't a 2-hour download, it was like a 10-second download, but it was this very clear picture. It was like 80/20 is like this graph. It's like this curve, and it goes up, 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 up as you go on the right side, which you can go into that book to explain that. And it was like, well, I've never seen a math curve that does that before. How would you do that? And so I spent years like unpacking, like, what does that mean? Okay. And when stuff comes in those kind of packages where it's like this acorn and then a whole oak tree can grow out of it, that's the head office, man. And so there's a gazillion business books, right? And there's probably 75 more that came out today, as far as I know, right? And they're just spewing out everywhere. And there's all these strategies and tactics and case studies and spreadsheets. But do you realize that some of the best businesses in the world don't come from somebody's analysis or brainstorming session? It's like it comes to you at some weird time. And guess what? You can cultivate that. It's not random access. It's not a lightning strike. It can be like you can get more.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because that's really interesting to me, that you can cultivate the muse. I think that's really what I got from the book, right? That's probably the strongest thing, the thing that I enjoyed the most, is that you actually unpack that a little bit, because I've heard that before, of course, right? I mean, the muse, the Greek time, I mean, Michael Gelb wrote about it, and Thinking Like Leonardo da Vinci, right? You discover that more than it is, oh, look, I learned this, right? So it's a discovery. So talk to us about cultivating the muse, Perry, and how we do that.
Well, so first of all, inspiration never comes when your fists are clenched. Okay? And most people are like, you're like, I got this pandemic and I got to figure out all this stuff, and there's all these people that I, they're all wrong, and and we're all just like, and you can't be in creative flow when you're sympathizing with all of that. And like, have you ever noticed, like, you get like a really great idea while you're pushing your kid on a swing, or when you're skiing, or at a rock concert, or when you're riding your bike through the forest preserve, okay? And like, most people are conditioned from roughly age 5, look busy. Just look busy, okay? And work hard, and mostly work hard means look busy. Okay? Like most people aren't even doing anything that's particularly useful or important, or they're not going to even remotely remember what they were doing at 10:13 this morning, like a week from now. Whatever they're doing at 10:13 this morning is ridiculously insignificant, right? But it's like, look busy. Like, well, maybe you shouldn't, right? 80-20 tells you that 50% of what you accomplish is going to happen in about 1% of your life. Okay. And so it's not like the least important 20% of whatever you're doing is even worth doing in the first place. Right. And so maybe you should open up some space. And I say the space starts in the morning. I mean, that's when most people are fresh. I know a few people that are like really at their prime at 2:00 in the morning, and there's night out. That's fine. But most people, you're fresh between like 7 and 10 or something like that. And like, so when you start your day, you don't like the worst. Okay, here, let me show you the worst possible way to start your day. Okay, that's it right there. Yeah, device in bed, reacting to stuff. And scroll. My friend Alice Adams calls it the death scroll. That like, well, you just start your day spiraling into the toilet, just right there, right? No, like, get your shower, get your cup of coffee or tea, sit down. Most people, if you just sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and like, go, what's on your mind? What's the idea that came to you in the shower? What are you thankful for? Hey, remember that great meeting you had yesterday afternoon, or the dinner that you had with your kids? Hey, what are your biggest questions today? What are you gratitude about? And just like, and it's like, this is protected, private, personal space. It is not subject to anybody's specification. This is not a guilt trip. You don't have to do it exactly the way I told you to. Maybe you do it on your picnic table on your porch, or maybe you do it in your pond or under your oak tree. I don't care. This morning I did it on my front porch, but like, and you listen. You ask a question and you listen. You might, maybe you're comfortable asking God. Maybe that language doesn't work for you and you just ask the muse. Like, I don't think it's helpful for me to be dogmatic. I'm just saying, this is like the best $10,000 an hour skill ever.
Listening, paying attention, asking a few questions, writing it down. That's interesting. So Perry, how does a guy that is a Google AdWords best-selling author, how does he decide to write this book? I mean, why this book? Why now for you? Because that's so strange, man. I mean, really, I when I got that email that said, "Hey, you want to check out Perry's new book?" Before I saw it, I'm like, "Yes, of course." And then I'm like, "No, hold on. No, this is very different. This is not what I expected." And yet it's still wonderful. I mean, really, man, I was shocked.
So it's like there's the story, and then there's a story behind the story, and then there's a story behind the story behind the story. Well, so people know me for the Google book, which is great, but the story behind the Google book is 80/20, because 80/20 was how I figured out Google. And so, like, I don't know, 10 years after I did the Google book is like, let's see if people will grab on to, hey, you know what? Google is great, but actually 80/20 is like the key to everything. You should really learn that. Then it's easy to figure out Google, or will people buy that? So we wrote this book and it turned out like people would buy that, and they did. Well, the story behind the 80/20 book is a story I just told you, which is a memo from the head office, which I got through this crazy person named Vivian. So here's what happened. So the 80/20 book, that if you open to the dedication page, the dedication says, "To the master mathematician, capital M, and to Vivian." Well, I knew that this crazy woman had walked up to me 10 years ago. I had only seen her one other time for about 30 seconds, and I never really talked to her, and I didn't know her. I didn't know who she was. And then, like, she disappeared. And when the book came out, it was like, okay, this Mysterious Vivian person, I have to hunt this person down. She's got to know about this. She must be somewhere. So I started asking around, and I figured out who she was, and I eventually tracked her down. And I was like, hey, like, you came up to me 10 years ago during this music thing? And she remembered. I'm like, could I like take you and your husband to dinner? I got a like whole story I want to tell you. Okay. Oh, and by the way, I only told you half the story. Okay, because so you got this formula, figure out the math formula. So I would work on it and I get stuck, and then I put it away, and 3 years ago, finally, I figured it out. And in fact, in 2018, the formula got published in Harvard Business Review. But so the formula became the backbone for this book, and there's a lot of useful stuff with it. Okay, so that was the formula, but then there was this other part of what she said. She said, God is going to bless your business. And well, about 6 months later, my business started hitting the hockey stick. And the reason it hit the hockey stick was I had just released the first Google book, and Google started going supernova. And Google just like, so this is 2003, okay? Like, Google was not a big deal in 2003, but like by 2006, they had like taken over the internet, right? And so what had happened was I had written the best-selling book on internet advertising and didn't know it. And it turns, so then I look at my emails and I look at the history and I find out 3 days before I met Vivian, I got an email from Ken McCarthy that said, Perry, I want you to speak on Google at my seminar. Like, nobody was speaking about Google at seminars. Okay, not Google advertising. Like, it was completely new. And I accepted his offer, and I knew that I had to write a book. And so I write this book, and the book hits just when the affiliate craze started with Google advertising. And so I'm like, yeah, like, well, I guess I'm going to support missions because God bless my business, like, big time. And so I tell Vivian this whole story. I got a calculus formula, and I show her this book. It's, it's over my shoulder. This Google, I guess, right over there. Okay. I'm like, I wrote this book, and she listens to all this. And when I open the 80/20 book and I show her, and I dedicated this book to you. Like, I'm just some random stranger she met 10 years ago. And she holds the book over her face like this. And her husband goes, darling, you don't usually get emotional. Like, she's weeping, And I'm like, Vivian, like, thank you. Like, you just completely changed my life. She's like, I was arguing with God about talking to you because I did not want to do that. I was like, I don't know who these people are. I've never been here before. I don't want to talk to this guy. I just want to go home. And she's like, nope, you're going to go talk to that guy. Okay. And so here's what happens next. So it's like, okay, so now Vivian and I are friends. Hey, like, besties. Like, you changed my life. So she becomes like my black sister from the west side of Chicago. All right. Which is really funny because, I don't know, I'm about as white and straight as, like, you could possibly get, right? So anyway, so we become friends, and we had this idea. Hey, Vivian. Well, when I tried to track Vivian down, this guy knew who she was. He goes, oh, Vivian does that to everybody. Yeah, like, that's just
wow.
She does that. Okay. And I'm like, okay, so I knew this other prophetic woman who can also do this. I said, let's do like a crazy experiment. I said, let's do a go-to webinar, no video, and let's have you and Aaron give people memos, and let's have like 25 people on the webinar, and I'll just say, Phil G, go. And then you're like, Phil's on the webinar listening. Aaron and Vivian have no idea who Phil G is, but they'll go, all right, okay, head office, give me a word for Phil. And then they'll just go, and then I'll say Jane F, go. And then we'll say Susie G, go. And, and so we do this based on me having just told them the first Vivian story. Like, this is what they know. Right. And so they're doing Phil G and Jennifer F and, all these people. And I'm getting these messages in the chat box like, dude, like, these people are reading my mail. Like, how, this is crazy. So we started doing that as a regular part of our membership. It's like, we got webinars and marketing tools and books and ebooks and all this stuff. Oh, yeah. And then we have these calls called memos from the head office, Well, people started liking them. And then first it's 1 call a month, and then it's 2, and then it's 3. We're up to 11. Okay. You have all these people on a webinar, and you're like, and they're just dishing out the memos. Well, this has been going on now for about 7 or 8 years. And you got probably 2014 or something. And so I started collecting all these stories. Like, these people would tell me these crazy stories of things that would happen to them. And I thought, okay, this is another untold story behind the story. And like, I need to get these in a book. And okay, and here's the thing about it. Most people that are into stuff like this, by personality wise, they tend to be very subjective, very emotional, very go with the flow, very hippie. And they have this habit of they never document anything. And it's like, how do I know this even happened? Like if you're hearing this third hand or fourth hand or even second hand, you're like, would you give me details that I can verify? And so when I wrote this book, I said, there is going to be nobody in this book who's anonymous unless there's a really good reason, okay? And like names, dates, places, locations, professions, what's their webpage, what's their LinkedIn, like everything, right? Like the book starts out with a guy named Gary Kloffenstein who used to manage $60 billion of assets for Mezero Financial. He's a currency trader, okay? He's a public guy. He's on boards of companies. People know who this person is. And he's telling specific stories about specific situations. Like every person in the book, we have an online thing like, this is where these people are. This is who they are. You could email them. You could meet them. We didn't make any of this up. And I've even got a chapter for the science people. Okay, like, is there science behind this? Yes. In fact, there is way more science behind this stuff than most people would ever guess. There's like 100 years of, and I'm not talking fringy, I'm talking Princeton, Stanford, Department of Defense, U.S. government, military, peer review, like I'm talking hundreds of peer-reviewed papers. I tell you exactly where to go look up all this stuff, okay? This stuff is real. So somebody needed to tell this story, and they needed to tell it in a demilitarized zone where people of any religious persuasion or non-religious persuasion would not feel like I'm trying to ram Jesus down your throat. Now, I'm a Christian, and everybody knows that. But, like, I don't feel like I have to, like, you got to do this my way. It's like, you know, the head office, like, works great.
That's so fun, man. That's so fun. Well, so, okay, so tell me about this membership program. Is that is that still open to people that they can get
yeah, it is.
Access to? Where do they find
it? Well, that's called Renaissance Club, and it's just a part of Renaissance Club, and it's $99 a month. We also have, we also do donation of any size webinars, and you can get on that list. If you go to perrymarshall.com/more memos, you get the supplemental materials for the book, and you'll get on that list, and we do those as well. And so, like, you could donate $1, you could donate $500, like whatever number you want. And we do that because we do actually pay these people. I mean, this is an expense, and it requires staff members and people to set up go-to webinars and, you know, and everything. And it's also curated. Like, I don't just put anybody on here. I mean, there's all kinds of intuitive people that might be able to give you some sort of memo, but they're not all equally good, if you know what I mean. So we're pretty selective. Yeah.
Awesome. Good stuff. So yeah, perrymarshall.com/more memos. That's great. Mm-hmm. So wow. So lots there. So Perry, if people want to get started along this path and start getting more downloads and tuning in to that, I mean, this, you might just be repeating what you said, but help folks, if we're wrapping up here, how do we get started tuning in?
Well, I want to tell you a story that I think, Phil, you might relate to. So I remember a long time ago, I had an evening appointment set in Indianapolis, which is 3 hours from Chicago. And I was getting ready to go at the end of the workday, and it was just starting to snow. And there was this little voice in my head that said, you know, call the guy and confirm before you go down. And I think like 3 different times I kind of, heard the little voice. I ignored the voice, and I drove to Indianapolis. When I got there, the guy wasn't at the restaurant. I called him from a payphone. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. I have a flight tomorrow morning. I really can't come. I'm so sorry. So I drove 3 hours for a no-show. Okay. Then on my way out of town, I get a flat tire. Okay. And then my spare is flat. And then I had to, okay, then just to drive on the spare, I had to like get a can of foam and like fill up the tire so I could drive to a truck stop and then buy a tire and then drive back home in a snowstorm with like cars off the road and stuff. And I never should have gone. Okay. Now, I think you should call that guy first. I don't think that was me.
Yeah.
Okay. Might you know anybody who's ever ignored one of those?
Never. No, just you, Perry. Right?
Okay.
No, for sure.
Okay. I would like to suggest to you that not every thought that you have is your own. And I would like you to just start paying attention. And you don't have to figure this out. You just have to pay attention. When this happened, I was consistently and systematically ignoring the head office voice and my own inner voice. Both. Like, okay, this was like 20 years ago. I'm in my late 20s. I'm a young guy. I'm pushing, driving, like workaholic, RPM, 6,000 RPM all the time. I was incredibly frustrated. I was kind of miserable. I was spinning my wheels. I was accomplishing very little. I wasn't listening to my wife. I wasn't listening to myself. I think I was doing a very poor job of listening to the head office. And I just, I got to spend 10 hours driving through a snowstorm just for the fun of it. Okay. Start by listening. And you go, well, listening to who? Well, get your notebook and just listen to yourself. Why don't you just start with that? If you can start to actually listen to yourself, like if I had listened to myself back then, I'd be like, I'm miserable. This isn't working. We need to do something else. You're shoving square pegs into round holes. Like that's what I would have told myself if I had been listening. When you start listening to your inner voice, you will eventually start to be able to tell, this is my rational mind, this is my conscience, this is my feeling, and this is the other. But you cannot listen when you're going 6,000 miles an hour. It's fine to go 6,000 miles an hour part of the day. Great. It's fun. And you should. But you got to have some low RPM time. I suggest you start your day with some low RPM time. And you go, all right, head office, what do you want me to know?
Wow. That's a great place to start. And I would suggest, folks, you should start with getting a copy of the book. Check out Memos from the Head Office by Perry Marshall. It's on Amazon. It's wherever books are sold. It's a soft cover, easy to read, all story stuff. Of course, real easy. And of course, PerryMarshall.com is Perry's website. Get to know him more. But Perry, where else can people find you? Where else can they connect with you?
Just go to PerryMarshall.com. I suggest you get the Memos book and sign up at PerryMarshall.com/more memos. There's a lot of stuff where I just kind of cut it, vein, and bleed. You're going to get emails where I'm like telling you about my midlife crisis. And some people will be like, I don't want to hear about anybody's midlife. Great. Unsubscribe. You know what? There's people that are like trying to figure out their midlife crisis, or you're trying to figure out your life. And you're like, I don't know if I have all the answers. Yeah, I don't either. I'm not pretending to, and you don't have to. Like, maybe you don't have to figure it all yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, folks, PerryMarshall.com/more memos. Get you that, or get your copy of Memos from the Head Office on Amazon or wherever. Perry, it is always a pleasure to talk to you, man. Congratulations on another great book. And congratulations on listening to the Muse, man. Something we all can do.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it, Perry. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. See you soon.